How's it going, guys? My name's Pedro, and a few days ago, Nvidia dropped a bomb on all of us with new graphics cards and a whole bunch of new features for streamers, esports titles, casual gamers, and everyone in between. Now, there'll be timestamps down below, so if you want to jump ahead to anything, feel free. So right off the bat, I'm jumping into the big guns, the thing we all came to see. People woke up early in the morning, slept late at night, all to view this. And that would be Jensen's leather jacket. That's a beautiful jacket on a beautiful man. And honestly, I'm pretty damn jealous. So the first feature they showed off as part of Nvidia Broadcast was a noise removal feature, which basically listens to the ambient sound around you and is able to block out other annoying sounds that basically your followers would not be wanting to see. For example, there'd be things like clicking of keyboards, humming of your PC, and even other environment noises like hair dryers, other vehicles going on, any humming in the background, or even noise of other people. Honestly, this will be a really good feature for anyone who's starting to stream and doesn't have the most ideal situation where they might be streaming in something like a dorm room or a bedroom or a house with a lot of people. So the second feature they announced was called virtual backgrounds, which basically removes the need of having a $300 green screen behind you when you stream. With virtual background, it allows you to impose yourself onto any other sort of images or videos or even other gameplay. So if you really wanted to, you could be like everyone else in those Zoom calls. And trust me, you all know who you are. So now Nvidia Broadcast really appeals to all the YouTube streamers and Twitch streamers that are fast emerging. Basically, with just a simple webcam, mic, mouse, and keyboard, you're able to create a really professional stream. And basically, the only barrier for entry now is how, engaging and interesting your content is. So now the next new technology announced by Nvidia at this conference was something called Nvidia Reflex, which basically is an improvement in their delivery pipeline from the point that the GPU crunches the actual frame through to when it's seen and able to be interacted with on screen. Now these improvements are supposed to yield a 50% reduction in latency, which will overall mean that from day one, once these drivers are launched, that all users will be more competitive in some of the most popular titles. Now granted, there will be updates that are needed to games, but what's really interesting is that games like Apex Legends, Fortnite, and Valorant are all going to be ready day one. And it's one thing to note out here that this reduction in latency is only to do with the actual crunching on your computer itself. It's got nothing to do with your internet connection and the actual latency from the host through to the actual server client that you're connecting through. Now, Nvidia also announced a 300Hz monitor and a new animation machinima platform. Now, not going to delve into those too much here, but they did seem really interesting to look at, and honestly, I think a lot of content will come out of these platforms themselves. So now Jensen finally moves on to the main event, but first there's a really cool cinematic with this Transformer-esque appeal, which shows off all of the previous cards right from the original GeForce GPUs all the way up to the 20 series cards, and then unveils the three new cards, the 3070, 3080, and 3090 GPUs. Now, let's break down each one of those separately. So let's start off with the 3070. So to put it simply, the 3070 is meant to replace the 2080 Ti from last generation in both RTX, DLSS, and regular rasterization workloads, which is really interesting because the 2080 Ti costs somewhere like $2,000, whereas the 3070 comes in at only $500 US. So this is really good for anyone who's looking for that perfect value to performance ratio where you still get access to all of the new features I mentioned before and stellar performance on any sort of workload you can throw at it. Now, when it comes to the technical specs of the 3070, you get 20 shader teraflops, 40 ray tracing teraflops, and 163 tensor teraflops, all while having 8 GB of traditional GDDR6 memory. Now, basically, to put that into perspective here, you get a buttload of performance in a card. Now, like I said, it's basically a 2080 Ti for $500. So for anyone who's looking to get a really good value card and is willing to swallow the pill of paying $500 for a GPU, I think getting the 3070 would be the best choice you could go with. So now onto the golden child, the RTX 3080. The first thing you'll notice is the new redesign of the cooler. Basically, you still get a dual slot card, but now it is more of a push-pull configuration, with one fan pulling cool air in and exhausting it out the backplate of the card, and then you have another fan pulling air through the heat pipes and then exhausting this cool air up into the roof of your case. The next thing you'll notice with this is the technical specs. Now the RTX 3080 boasts 30 shader teraflops, 58 ray tracing teraflops, and 238 tensor teraflops, all of this while containing 10 gigabytes of their new GDDR6X memory. Now this memory is faster and has a higher throughput than what you'll find on the 3070 with GDDR6. Now, all of these technical specifications are great, but how does this go about translating into real-world performance that we'll be able to see either in games or in any other workloads? For gaming specifically, Nvidia has come out and said that the 3080 will be able to game on some titles at 4K 144 FPS. This is with ray tracing maxed out and having all of the other settings at max. Along with this, on other titles, the 3080 will be able to go all the way up to 4K at 60 FPS, which really blows the performance of the old 2080 Ti while maintaining a very reasonable price point at $600. And while definitely not cheap for a graphics card, to put into perspective, a 2080 Ti would struggle to go do 4K 60 FPS and would cost nearly $2,000 for some of the 2080 Ti cards. And now lastly, what I like to call the flex of a card, the 1390. Now this card by no means I think needs to exist, but I'm definitely glad that it's around, and it really does show off just how, I guess, powerful and how much raw computing horsepower Nvidia can pack into one of their cards. So now the 3090 to start with basically replaces the old Titan line and now streamlines it as part of their consumer product stack. So the 3090 from a technical perspective sports 36 shader teraflops, 69 RT teraflops, and 285 tensor teraflops, and all in all has a whopping 24 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory. Now this is the same type of memory that you'll see on the 3080, but basically it is just like more than just doubled. And now this card also shares the same cooler design as the 3080, but instead of it being a dual slot card, it is now a thick boy which has a 3-slot card on this monster of a GPU. Now the gaming performance on the 3090 is nothing short of breathtaking, with it sporting 8K 60 FPS ray tracing enabled gaming content, which honestly is mind-blowing when you come to think about it. So now onto my thoughts from this launch. To start with, the performance is nothing short of breathtaking, with the 3070 basically outdoing all of the 20 series cards, and the 3080 providing a stunning value to performance, and then you basically get the 3090, which basically puts anything else that the competition would have to shame, with 8K RTX 60 FPS content, which is nuts to say the least. Now there are some things that I am concerned about, and a lot of it comes down to the cooler design of the 3080 and 3090. Now with this new push-pull configuration, I am curious about CPU temperatures and GPU temperatures, because traditionally the vapor chamber cards from the 20 series definitely did run hot, and with these cards now saying 20 degrees less, they still have a significantly higher power output. So I'm kind of curious to see how this will end up working when we get these cards in and are able to test, use them, and pretty much get all of the details on that. By the way, get subscribed for that one there so you don't miss it. Now, the other thing that I'm interested about is as well, with this cooler, you're basically going to be introducing more heat into your CPU in traditional mid-tower cases, while at the same time potentially increasing the actual noise due to turbulence in any small ITX cases. So as you would have seen on cases like the K55 we reviewed, you basically are having the sandwich style layout, and what you basically have is the fan is now spinning and is pushing hot air into the back of the motherboard, so that potentially might have an extra heat element on the VRMs and CPU itself, but you might also have a turbulence issue where you'll have extra noise due to this, basically this wind hitting the back of the motherboard and not having anywhere to escape. Obviously, we'll test this in its entirety when it comes to the full review of this card, so that's definitely something I'll be interested to look into. Now, speaking of things that are interesting, The price to performance of these cards definitely took me by surprise, because basically they're keeping the same price points that they had last year, but they're chucking in a whack ton more performance, which is kind of surprising considering that Intel GPUs aren't out on the market yet. AMD has nothing in the space. The only real competitors that I can see are the PS5 and Xbox, which, come to think about it now, is really the solid competition and really what will be driving the sales and the competition for the new RTX GPUs, because the launch date of the 3070 and 3080 is due for September and October, which basically beats out the consoles by at least a month in the case of the 3070, because I guess traditionally consoles would be coming out around the November timeframe, so that way it's right in time for everyone buying for Christmas. So it seems that Nvidia for once is actually taking the consoles as a legitimate threat to their business and their sales of their graphics cards. So maybe they felt that keeping the prices down would further lock all of their PC consumer base into just playing on their PC, and could potentially stop them from venturing over to the forbidden console realm, which is really interesting because from what I'm seeing is that these consoles are basically geared up to be actual competitors to PCs now. So I guess all in all, we end up winning as consumers because I guess A, these graphics cards are cheaper, B, we get a whole bunch of new features from things like Nvidia Broadcast, Nvidia Reflex, and I guess C, all of these new features and products are all at a very reasonable price for us. And I guess that, all in all, is really the value that comes out with competition. We win as consumers, and basically the companies have to sort of fight it out to make sure that they're providing a reason for people to buy their products, either by providing straight performance for the user or in other ways, such as Nvidia Broadcast and Nvidia Reflex, along with having ray tracing on more games that are coming out. Things like the new Call of Duty was one that they mentioned. Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting time to be purchasing technology in general, because I guess consoles are about to get really good from the sounds of it. PCs are definitely getting good. And I think, yeah, we're all in a really good space to be able to pick and choose exactly what we want and get a good deal on it. Either way, guys, that's been it from me. Maybe think of subscribing if you enjoyed this kind of video. Drop a like down below if you want to see more stuff like this, and maybe check out some of this relevant content you see coming up on your screen. Either way, my name's Pedro. Hope you all have a great day.